morning, everyone. Welcome to Scribble Time with Panda. Today's topic is Studio Ghibli. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar, they are like the Disney of Japan, and they have created numerous iconic figures and movies over the years. And they're some of my favorite works of animation, and I'm a big animation fan. So, if you're unfamiliar, just Google or search for Studio Ghibli, and you'll see what I mean. And if you haven't seen their films before, I really recommend that you go check them out. But for those of you who do know of them, feel free to post your sketch suggestions in the chat, and we'll get started. So I've already have a list going of what we can start drawing on while we wait for other chat suggestions. So to kick us off, we're going to go with one of the most iconic characters, Totoro. So let's go. Good morning, everyone. And so Totoro is actually pretty similar in terms of our. He's a similar shape as as my panda. I probably drew some inspiration from him subconsciously, but in terms of the body shape. But obviously, there's a few other differences that we can take from. So, for example, this is one of the more iconic scenes where it's about a story about these two girls who moved to a new place and a new house, and basically their mom is in the hospital and their dad works from home as a writer, I believe. But anyways, I just posted this here to kind of show what the size and the scope of Totoro, because he's a fairly jovial fellow, very kind, benevolent. He doesn't say much, he just roars and grunts and such. So I guess that's where we have a few similarities between him and the panda. And he also has these really interesting ears. They're kind of shaped like trees, almost diamond shape, or almost like arrows. So I'm just going to draw those in. And I first heard about Studio Ghibli, I think, when I was in high school. And I didn't really know much about them. And it wasn't until I think I saw them while I was watching this one show. It was movie reviews with Siskel and Ebert. And if you guys don't know, for those of you who may be unfamiliar with them, they were a couple of film critics that would have a show, and they're famous for doing the whole thumbs up and thumbs down rating for the movie. So if a movie was really good, you'd get 2 thumbs up, one thumbs up from each of them, and if it was an okay movie, one would give 1 thumbs up, the other would give 1 thumbs down, and so forth. And a really bad movie, obviously, would get 2 thumbs down. But so yeah, it was. I think the film that was coming out around that time was Princess Mononoke, and prior to that, I only really watched Western animation. You know, things like Disney and Looney Tunes and Warner Brothers. Tiny Toons was really big when I was growing up, and so it wasn't really something that I had access to. And I think in the 90s, there was some pretty... I know there was some pretty hardcore, 90s animation that was, geared a lot more towards adults. And so maybe that was another reason why I didn't have access to Japanese animation. But it also felt a lot different. I think when I saw some of the older things, I think I saw some clips of... Obviously, Transformers is animated overseas, but it wasn't like... it was that apparent because they were all dubbed in English. Now, when I finally got to university, that's when a friend of mine showed me the Princess Mononoke. And that was I wasn't sure what to make of it. It was, and then at that time, it was a very shocking film because it was, it had stuff in there that I normally wouldn't see animation, where it's like action and drama and there wasn't any singing animals in it, and so I didn't really like it at first, and then it wasn't until later where my sensibilities were starting to change, and now I could appreciate it for what it is, and now it's one of my favorite films that the studio has produced. So Totoro also has this big. He's kind of like a big chinchilla, and he's like a chinchilla, a bear, and owl all mixed into one. So I'm just gonna kind of. He has these iconic patterns, and of course it's, this is a good example of how when you want to create new fantastical characters, sometimes it helps to just combine attributes from older or from existing animals. So it's basically just remixing. It's kind of like creating a new dish. Like you're not making when you're cooking. I use cooking a lot in my analogies, but when you're cooking, you're using the same ingredients that have always existed over time. Like it's rare that we're getting access to new things that, from another planet or something that's just been undiscovered, like an herb. But we are just using the things that have been given to us: salt, sugar, lemons, limes, vegetables, certain cuts of meat, and we're all just mixing and combining them into different flavors, and we're still creating new different flavors today. And I think it's really interesting that we can still create a new experience using the ingredients that we still have at our disposal, and it's just a matter of just finding out the different combinations. So there's an infinite number of combinations to make a dish. You can make a new type of pizza. You can make a new type of burrito. You can even make a new type of apple pie. These things are just waiting to be invented. And let's see here. I'm gonna do. So he also has two companions. He has like a couple smaller pandas, or a couple smaller Totoros. One's like a white translucent one that sometimes disappears, and the other one is also is a blue. He's a blue Totoro, and he always carries a sack with him. Here, I'll have him carry the sack right here. Or I'll just have him like, or maybe I'll draw him a little bit different. Let me move the white Totoro right here, and then the blue Totoro can hold the sack like this. So that gives me a little bit more room to work with. Now, to be honest, I actually haven't seen all the Studio Ghibli movies. I've seen a good number of them. I've seen, I think the few of them that I haven't seen are like When Marnie Was Here, and usually the movies I've watched are the ones that have been done by Hayao Miyazaki, which is the, he's the creative engine behind it, and he's, they're actually making another movie. He's infamous for retiring and unretiring over and over because he just can't stay away from the drawing board. So he's kind of like the Japanese equivalent of Brett Favre, or I think he's probably unretired more than Brett Favre has. So maybe Brett Favre is the American Miyazaki with football. And then I'm gonna put the two girls. So let's do that, and I'm just gonna quickly save this because normally I save it beforehand, but today I forgot to do it. Just to kind of give you guys an insight about how I name my files. I usually put them in order with a date, such as this, where and then I kind of put in a subheader, just because if I want to search for it later, it'll be a little bit easier. But it's probably a little bit redundant for me to type in scribble time, but it's just a force of habit. So I'll just do that, and let's get started. Always save. Okay. Okay, so that's our Totoro, and then let's move on. So we got Lana. Let's do and one of the things that's been really cool with Studio Ghibli films is that they have a lot of iconic looking characters that you don't normally would see in characters here. For example, I was just trying to Google what you meant by turnip head, and I realized, and I remember now because it's from the film. Obviously, it's from the film Howl's Moving Castle, which is based on a book, and it's a prince. I think he's a prince that got changed into a scarecrow. So he has a turnip for a head. Obviously, that's kind of where he gets his description from. And so he looks something like this. Oh, let's do something different. But basically, he just wears a suit, and he has a giant turnip for a head. So he's like this guy right here. Let's move him out of the way. Okay, so we got a Totoro, and of course, this is a spinning top that he's on. It's pretty. What I like about some of these films is like they're pretty out there. Like there's no reason for why does he have a spinning top, or why does he have a friend who's a cat and a bus? That's just the way it is. Just accept it. And I really like to have that kind of freedom with my own work, where I just don't necessarily have to explain everything. Like there is that sense of wonder, like why. And you just don't know. And I think a lot of times it just feels like there's just way too much explanation going on. I think even with kids films where it's like, we have to have an answer for everything. And I think it's okay just to leave some stuff open-ended. Obviously, I think it's important to explain it to a certain extent, to where you kind of give enough for the audience to bite on. And so, because otherwise you just leave the whole audience untethered, and they're just like, everything just feels so random. So yeah. So he has a little cob pipe, like so. I think one of the things with Studio Ghibli films too is that and they certainly have fallen into a house style, at least with the later films. It feels like, but I like just the variety of content that they could produce, where it's like you can have a film such as let's just bulge him out a little bit here. You can have a film like Totoro, which is really there's no violence really. It's just it's a kid's film. There's not really any action going on. But then you can have a film afterwards like Castle in the Sky, which is all about adventure and all about danger, and it's really an exciting film. And one of my I love that film too. And then you can have a film like Porco Rosso, which is, it has things that can appeal to kids like airplanes, and and some adventure, a sense of some scenes of adventure, but it's definitely a very different feel than the other than the other films. And I think that's why I appreciate, especially with the early Disney films, where they just were making, they made Snow White, they made Pinocchio, and each of those films, even though they're kind of kids properties, they felt very different from each other. A film like, for example, like Bambi looks much different than, say, Cinderella versus, and also Fantasia, and I think when it comes to creativity, it's important to I think there's something where to be said about when you're a successful studio, you kind of have to get into this place where you have a hit and you need to keep the ship going. But I think there's something to be said about still being able to innovate and be able to produce new experiences that don't feel like they're treading old ones. Because I think at some point you start ending up becoming a business, and what that happens from that is I think business, it's an interesting challenge to be able to deliver on a product or deliver artwork that people really like. So you kind of have to base it on something that people already like, but you also have to introduce them to something new, right? So I'm just going to do this here. I mean, I wouldn't say that my pandas are as well known in the the mass culture, but they didn't. There's a point where they didn't exist, right? So and it wasn't until I started drawing them that they began to exist, and then finally there was they are now something. At least they exist in the world. They may not be as well known, but they exist, and so. Give him some torn pants here, and a stick. He always has a stick that he hops up and down. And he has some kind of torn, tattered pieces of clothing because he's always out in the wind, out in the elements, because he's a scarecrow. And that's our turnip head right there. So we have our Totoro, we have our turnip head done in panda form. Let's do turnip heads from Howl's Moving Castle. I'm going to do, we got Haku, Kamaji, Red Panda as Princess Kaguya. I still haven't seen that film yet. I've been trying to figure out a way to watch it, and I know HBO Go is going to be debuting next month, but it's so far away, Also, the Code of My Spirits, those are some of my favorite too, and I have drawn them as pandas before, so I am familiar with what they are like. So one of the things that I always like, I'm going to move this over here so that he actually has, because it feels a little bit. Yeah, it feels a little bit better there. Okay, I'm going to do Nausicaa. So Nausicaa is like the one that kind of started it all. And it was quite an epic story. It still holds up to me. I think it just feels it's such a big grand story. And I remember the way that they developed Nausicaa was that they had, so she's a girl that lives in a post-apocalyptic world, and she, the whole world's covered with poisonous spores and dangerous creatures that have mutated after years of war. And so she goes about, and she's constantly flying on this wind rider. And let's see here, she has a really cool glider that she rides, and she always goes out into the fields, like exploring and trying to collect samples. She has a way of speaking to the animals, so she's kind of like and all these animals are like huge mammoth-sized insects. Like, think of like potato bugs, but with sharp with like sharp not tentacles, but claws and such, and they're always trying to eat everybody. So it's a very dangerous place, but yeah, it's a favorite of mine. I mean, all these films are pretty good. There's only a couple that I feel like are a little bit on the weaker side. I think Tales of Earthsea was one that I just felt a little bit boring, to be honest. And so I'm gonna give little panda ears like this. So she has these little handlebars, and so she basically rides this glider without any like straps, which is really cool because it kind of gives a sense of like she's a daring individual. Let me just size this up a little bit more. Actually, I'm going to change this up. Let me change this up. I think this one was, I feel like I need to see see her at a different angle. Let's try doing. So the glider is, I'm going to move off turnip head here. So the glider kind of is like this shape, has a shape like so. It's kind of like a tube, and then you have the wing come across like this. It's a pretty big wing. It's kind of flatter at the top of the wing, and so I'm just going to just offset it just slightly like so. And the wings kind of come off tapered like this. So it's a very soft looking shape. All right. And then we have the two handlebars that kind of come around here and here. And I'm going to have Petunia be our panda. Like so. Let's keep that perspective locked in. And a little tail there. And Nausicaa kind of wears this jacket where it's like, it's kind of like a, yeah, it's like a it's almost like a suit. It's not a special suit, but it's it's got little pockets for her little gadgets and stuff. Let's try doing this, okay? And then just hook it up to there. I think there might be, let me just double check to see if there's some other types of geometry here. I think there's little tails that go like that, or little like there's some, I think there is some propulsion on here if I remember right. And then we can just add a little bit of dimension to show that we do big sweeping forms. I think there's some tail fins back here. And then she has a special type of helmet that goes like so, with some actually I'm gonna put off the I'm gonna show off more of her head, because normally she's wearing like some goggles with like a little head cape. But I'm going to just do it as a hood so that you can see more of her. Let's change this up a bit. I also love the soundtracks as well. I think one of the neat things about the Studio Ghibli films is that there's, they're not musicals, and so they're kind of seen more as like a traditional film, and so the music is basically is now in service to the film, whereas I think sometimes with the Disney films, the stories or the songs can feel like the movie is in service to them. I'm gonna give her some hair, and I don't, I don't mind songs, and like I love the old Disney films too. But I think it's become such a, up until recently, it's kind of been this thing that they have to do it. They have to add songs into their films, and I think that kind of hindered their creativity a little bit, where they have to like do these musicals and write good musicals too. And I think certain films they did it really well, like Lion King and Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin, but then it kind of got a little bit awkward once I think they got to like Mulan, Hercules, those films. I enjoyed Mulan for what it was, but it definitely was, I think it felt a bit forced to try to cram something in it. Like it felt like it could have been a story that they could have told as something that like playing it straight. But yeah, okay, so yeah, Sao Takahata, I love his work. I like I mean I'm a little bit probably in the minority, but I really liked Grave of the Fireflies, and I probably would. I was meaning to watch it again recently, but it was like to have a film like that where it's just drawings and it's just like it makes you it makes you bawl, or it's just really sad. But I mean it's still a good film, and it kind of just shows a different dimension to events that we don't really think about when it comes to like war and war and the tragedies and how it affects certain people outside of like the military. So I'm just gonna give these get these boots. She also has these boots too. Okay, all right. So that's our Nausicaa. Next, we'll go with let's see. We'll go with Lana's suggestion. So we'll do Haku and Chihiro. So let's put them over here. So one announcement I'd like to remind everybody. So tomorrow, if we get enough drawings for Fan Pandas, just submit your drawings. Just either message me on Facebook or DM me on Instagram, Twitter, so forth. Have those ready for me, and then if you send those to me, I can get them posted onto the show, and we can work on those tomorrow. So I'll be doing redrawings of your own drawings, and they don't have to be pandas. They don't have to start as pandas. They have to, they could be your own characters, or maybe characters inspired by something else. And I'll have those on the show. So sorry, I was just trying to be trying to get this down right. So Haku is from the movie Spirited Away, which is, I think, the only Academy Award that Studio Ghibli won, and thankfully they were able to. I think that was the year that Cars came out, if I remember right. So which is like, I know some people would probably say, oh, that's a caveat that Pixar wasn't in it or in the running, because at the time Disney wasn't really producing quite as, they were still trying to get their CG act together, so they didn't really have films that were really in contention for the Oscar. But it was, so it was quite an achievement for them to get that. And I think it's interesting to see how some foreign films are now being more considered for prestigious, or maybe not prestigious, but like well-known awards like that, because I think Disney films, they tend to probably get an inordinate amount of awards. they tend to win. I think, in my mind, I think they win too many because it's. Just because there's so many movies being made today that it's hard for everybody to see all of them, so you can't really get a good representation in terms of it's just a logistics problem. Like there's too many films being made, and so if you're having everybody judge, trying to get an accurate accounting of all the films that would be considered for the Oscar, it's just impossible for everybody to watch all the movies that come out every year, even if there's definitely potential for like a really amazing film to never ever make it into the Oscar contention. And I think that's, it's just I think it's just a logistical problem, and you have to add some barriers of entry to, so you're not flooded with millions and millions of entries. And obviously that will definitely be exclusionary, I guess, to some extent, but you have to have standards. So, but I think the theater run requirement is going to be definitely outdated after all this is after all this virus stuff is said and done, because like who's gonna go watch movies in the theater anymore? I'm gonna kind of miss it because I like the theater experience. I don't always go out and buy popcorn for myself, but you know, there's something about watching a film with a lot of people, especially if it's a film that, like, sometimes a film event can be pretty amazing when you have like the right type of anticipation for it, and sometimes it's also memorable too, where it doesn't end up that way. I remember seeing some films where, you know, there are a lot of people and there's a lot of anticipation for watching it, and then like the movie ended up being not so great, and so everybody was leaving the theater being like, oh man, what happened? And so like you kind of become part of this, like, you know, you've all shared in this type of experience together. It's something that just feels like, you know, we can look back and think like, remember that time when we were all like, all these people were really wanting to see The Matrix Reloaded, and how like there's so much anticipation for it, and then it didn't end up being that great of a movie. Okay, so we got Haku there. All right, so Haku is let's do who is Kamaji? Man, you're definitely a much more thorough Studio Ghibli fan than I am, because I can't remember some of these names from these characters. Oh, Kamaji. Okay, he's the multi-headed or multi-armed servant of the spa. Let's see here. Here, I'm just gonna quickly put Chihiro in here because I think I just want her in there. So Chihiro is the protagonist of the movie. She is she's kind of a spoiled little brat, and she, you know, she's basically the Alice in Wonderland, and she ends up getting into the situation where her parents get turned into pigs, you know, when they're visiting this deserted amusement park, and so she gets stuck in this fantasy land. And so while she's there, while everything's kind of going crazy before her eyes, you know, this mysterious figure, Haku, comes around and rescues her. And so she just gonna put some mirrors like that. Gonna add just a hand here. She has like a little short sleeve baggy shirt that she wears. I think the thing that I also really enjoy about Studio Ghibli films is that it still feels like you're watching like a cinematic event. I think these days, for myself, I feel like I'm longing for the days when movies can feel like you're actually watching an event. Certainly things like I think some of those feelings rekindled when, for example, I was watching the latest Star Wars trilogy, at least the first part of it, and afterwards it felt like, so there's a couple of instances where it feels like you just magically get teleported somewhere. There's another film, Mad Max, that I watched with some friends, and it was I remember coming away from the theater being like, man, I felt so pumped watching that film. Like you felt like you just came back from a ride. Okay, so that's our Chihiro. Let's move to I'm gonna move over to or let me just look at the chat here. So we got let me do Princess Kaguya, and then I'll do Kamaji. I really want to see Princess Kaguya, just because it's taking a more natural approach to rendering. So there's a lot of animated films these days that tend to do a very clean line, but what's really interesting is there's a scene in that was depicted in the trailer from Princess Kaguya where she's just running through a field, and it's all like these really rough pencil strokes, and I really want to see that film just to see their use of it. So I'm going to try something different. Let me try using my pencil brush, and pencil brushes, let's see, I don't know if this is going to work out. It's probably not. Let's just do let's just play it straight. So this is what it's going to be like, where I think she's escaping, if I remember right. Or I could just draw with this brush where it's like it's like drawing with the side of a pencil. So I do have a pencil brush like this, but I think it might lag a bit if I'm drawing really big. So I don't think that's going to work out too well today. Let me see. Let's try a pencil like this. Ultimate charcoal pencil. So I have all these brushes here off to the side where, yeah, I'm just going to ditch that. So let's move these guys over here. So she's just gonna have all this hair that she's just gonna be whipping around. And then she's going to be wearing this so this is definitely going to be a messier coloring sheet. Let's just say that. So I'm trying to purposely make it all messy like this so that it does feel similar to our reference here. I'm going to put a moon like that. boxing glove out here, yada yada. I'm gonna simplify these a little bit more. So you could just be pretty messy with this hair. I'm gonna try not to make it so crazy, because it's like sometimes if you make it a little bit too crazy, it'll end up looking kind of disorderly. I mean, that's kind of the point, I guess. I'm trying to get a handle on this hair. Yeah, I think I'm gonna redo this hair because it's getting to be a bit too crazy for my liking. So I'm just gonna do this because we gotta organize and we gotta make sure that our drawings are gonna read even when people don't see it, so don't know the reference. That's why I gotta say. So always add like an ear in there. And then you can always add lines to shade. I think one of the things that was really cool about this scene, here I'm going to turn off Haku right there, is that just all the brush strokes and yeah, you see a lot of this so on the coloring sheets, you guys can, I guess you guys can like fill in this this hair. Oops, excuse me. Got caught up there. All right, so this is our Princess Kaguya. Let's go to Kamaji. And we are about, I think we have enough for 2 more, so I'm just going to see what we can work with here. We'll do Kamaji, and then we'll go with the Kodama spirits. So I'm going to do Kamaji. Kamaji's like, he's kind of like a, yeah, like he manages the furnace inside the spa in Spirited Away. So he's like this really long-legged guy. And I really like, one of the things I really like about Studio Ghibli movies is that a lot of the creatures and characters look really creepy. But, you know, there is a certain charm to them. And they have, you know, they have personality, you know. They have, some are grumpy, some are have a little bit nervous, and so I think it feels like they feel like real people, and I think that's what I want to see whenever I'm trying to draw or write a story, and I'm still working on it too, just trying to get that sense of like how do I, here, let me move this out of the way first. Okay, it's like, how do I draw or how do I write a story where that it feels like a real person, like I'm not just like working off of what I kind of see from other movies. I think that's how I started off when I wanted to just draw something that felt like, I mean, sure, I think it's important to be inspired by the things that you grew up with, and I think you know, certainly those things should continue to inspire you to produce more things. But certain things have kind of been adopted over the years as like the way that people talk and act in television is not really the way that people talk in real life. And I think it's okay in certain extents if you're trying to work within that medium, or that you're trying to give a certain flavor to it. But if you kind of do it too many times, it feels very it definitely feels very cliche. And so I like to try to move away from the cliche and do something slightly different. So he has a ton of these arms, and he's always hunched over. He's always like, this is gonna be tricky because it's gonna be like, gonna have him with a cup of tea. Then he's also going to hold a pair of chopsticks too in another hand. Yeah, let's put the chopsticks over here. And we'll add another pair of chopsticks here. Make that a little bit smaller so that it kind of shoots across. Then we'll have another hand coming down here, grabbing the wheel. It's a wheel that they crank. So let's move him out of the way. Eating his lunch while on the job. Oh, I see what happened. Something got a little bit mixed up here. Man, this makes me want to go out and watch a Ghibli movie now. So, and I highly recommend going to, just checking it out on Amazon or not Amazon. I think the Studio Ghibli movies are going to be streaming on HBO Go once it comes out. But if you also have a friend who is borrowing it for you, or who has a copy, just ask to borrow it, because it's really worth your while, in my opinion, especially if you're a fan of animation. Okay, let's see here. Let's do that. Sits on top of this wood box platform. Let's try to just define some stuff a little bit more, because it's kind of a bit messy. So I'm just going to make sure that this stuff is going to read, because when you have a lot of detail here, it kind of gets a little bit lost. So you want to make sure that it's going to be present. He's got a thumb here. Let's see, he's got 3 arms over here, and I think I'm gonna put another arm right here where he's like, he has like 6 arms. Did I give him enough arms? I think I did. Okay. Okay. So that's our Kamaji. That's my first time drawing this guy, so that's a lot of fun. Thanks a lot for that suggestion, Lana. And finally, I'm going to just close on the wood spirits from Princess Mononoke. Those are the Kodama spirits. They're kind of like bobbleheads, and they like to turn their, I forgot what the reason was, but they like to turn their heads and then they snap back into place and they kind of make a rattling sound. So I'm just going to turn that off, turn this one off, turn that one off, and then put this off to the side. But their heads aren't necessarily, they're not always, what's the word? They're not always consistent. They're all different. They're all very different shapes and sizes. So that's always something to keep in mind. So there's a little bit of variety that you can add with these characters that makes them a little bit more fun. Okay, so let's do Kodamas. So I like to do Kodamas like this, where you just draw a bunch of random shaped heads. And because we're gonna panda, I'm gonna make these a little bit flatter actually, because we're gonna make them pandas. So we gotta add the ears. So they tend to have like 3 eyes, maybe a nose. Sometimes they're can make some pretty wacky shapes. Put the nose up here. Then we'll add our little panda bodies. Sometimes it's these really simple drawings that kind of make it a little bit more difficult to look good if you're not careful, because sometimes they be a little bit too simple. So I'm trying to avoid that. So I'm trying to give them the panda bodies, panda proportions. Yeah, so there's our Kodamas. Just gonna add a couple more just to make him. And maybe I'll add another ones that kind of snap their heads. Like in the movie, they actually sound like. They actually like do sound like rattles. They go. And then in the movie, they actually have like hundreds and hundreds of these guys just like snapping their heads back and forth, and so it's a really neat scene to watch with these guys. So definitely merchandisable. Merchandise, I tell ya. Okay. Make this feel a little bit rounder. I think it's getting away from me a little bit. Okay, well, there we have it. So thanks a lot for tuning in to Scribble Time with Panda. Hope you really enjoyed watching all these, and like I said, if you guys got a chance to watch any Studio Ghibli movies, go out and look for them at your library or buy them on Amazon. I guess I could add some affiliate links below, but it's just I hope the show can also bring some new work introduce some new work for you guys to take a look at, or some new artists to check out, and maybe in the future I can have a guest artist come along and we can do like a battle, so that'd be fun. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed today's Scribble Time. Like I said, if you guys want to do Fan Friday tomorrow, feel free to just send me your drawings, and I'll bring them onto the show. Kind of need a little bit of a critical mass, so if I can get like 5 drawings together sent to me by tomorrow, feel free to then we can have Fan Friday going on. So that's Studio Ghibli Scribble Time, and this is Nolan signing off. Feel free to download the coloring sheets after the show, available at punchingpandas.com/scribbletime. That'll be in the description below. So you guys have a great day, and keep drawing. Bye.